The motion is adopted.
The Republican Party controls the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. They pretty much run Washington in the year 2025. How did they get in that position, and what are they accomplishing? The chairman of the Republican Party, Michael Whatley, he's steering the ship. He sat down with me to talk about how they got there, what they're doing, and what challenges they face ahead. Mr. Chairman, thanks for doing this with us.
It's good to be on with you again.
10 years ago, the president, now president, came down that escalator and announced that he was going to run for president. Where were you when that happened, and what were your thoughts at that time?
Sure, I was down in North Carolina, and I thought that this is a game-changing opportunity for the country. You know, I was one of the first in North Carolina to get on board with his team to help him out in North Carolina. And the amazing thing to me is that 10 years ago when he came down that escalator and said, we're going to make America great again, it was with a fairly simple formula. You know, we're going to make America, we're going to make the economy strong, we're going to make America strong, we're going to have a strong border. It was really about strength. It was about, the economy, the border, national security, and here we are 10 years later, and that's exactly what he is implementing in this term.
When you look at what has happened in those 10 years, how important has Trump been to the GOP brand?
Well, he's completely remade the Republican Party. I mean, we are now the party of the working class. We are a party that represents every community. We represent every family. And I think that's a dramatic shift from the country club Republicans that we had in the past. And it really, truly makes us a mainstream party. The president spends a lot of time talking about being a common sense candidate and running a common sense campaign. Right now, what we're seeing is the Republican Party, we are the common sense party. I mean, the Democrat Party has lurched so far to the left. And really, truly, when you ask for an identity on the Democratic Party, it's open borders, inflationary spending, a weak America. That's not what the American people want. President Trump really does a fantastic job of tapping into mainstream America and understanding the issues that those families and communities care about and putting solutions on the table. That is so important for the long-term viability of the Republican Party.
When people think of either political party during an election year, during a presidential election year, it's clear what their job is. They need to raise money, they need to get the word out, they need to organize voters and so on. But it's not an election year. We're in an off year. What happens? What does the RNC do day to day in off years like this that people may not be aware of?
Yeah, to win in a battleground state or a battleground congressional district, you really need three things. You need a great candidate who runs a great race. You need to get out the vote, and you need to protect the ballot, right? So we at the RNC, with state parties all across the country, we get out the vote, we protect the ballot, right? So right now, we are making infrastructure investments. We are recruiting and we are training volunteers. We are working, to change the laws in the states to make sure that we have election integrity programs. Basic things like only American citizens can vote, voter ID, making sure that states are cleaning up their voter rolls. We're working right now on that. And so we've already filed 40 lawsuits that we're engaged in this year. We've got legal demand letters into all 50 states right now telling them that they need to clean up their voter rolls and making sure that they do that. So the work in terms of the infrastructure investments to get ready for Election Day is well underway.
When you talk about voter integrity, you talk about voter fraud, you talk about the voter rolls, you talk about having people at the polls poll checkers. How important was the voter integrity effort in the 2024 election?
I think it was huge, and I think it was huge on a couple different levels, right? So we were able, we filed 157 lawsuits last year. 90% of those were in the election integrity field, making sure that those basic protections on elections are in place. And that was really important. We also want to make sure that we have people in the room. Every time a vote is cast or counted, we want to have attorneys, we want to have volunteers, we want to have poll judges and poll workers. We recruited 230,000 volunteers all across the country, and we were in every precinct in every battleground state. We recruited 6,500 attorneys. And so we were there with a physical presence, and then we talked about it a lot, right? And why did this matter? For two reasons. One, we wanted every Republican who was concerned that their vote was going to get canceled by cheating to feel comfortable enough and confident enough that their vote was going to count, so they'd go vote. Because if we had 2% of the Republicans in Arizona or Georgia or North Carolina not turn out to vote, we would have lost, right? The second thing is we wanted to make sure that everybody on the other side understood in very clear terms. If you cheat or you help somebody else cheat, we will find you and we will prosecute you, to make sure that we didn't have any systematic attempts.
Did you see evidence of cheating in 2024?
You know, what we saw was multiple states who opened up the process for voting. Especially by mail, where they weakened protections for mail-in ballots, where they put drop boxes in place, where they allowed ballots to come in 10, 12 days after the elections. And so we were very concerned that that sets up an environment that is ripe for cheating, and we wanted to make sure that we shut that down.
And I don't want to go too far adrift here, but I got to ask the question. When I ran for office twice in the 90s, and I remember the integrity of the ballot was the number one thing. They still had paper ballots then. They'd punch cards and they would put them in, but there would be a sheriff's deputy at every single precinct would escort those to headquarters and take them. That never left some official hand somewhere along the way. Nowadays we see these drop boxes in certain places, completely unprotected out in the public. Is that a concern, and is that, constitutionally speaking, is that legal?
Well, it is a concern, and I will say this, that states set election law, not the federal government. There are some federal laws that are in place right now, such as only American citizens can vote in federal elections, but the states have to enforce it, right? States need to clean up the voter rolls, but the states need to clean them up, right? But elections are generally left up to the states. We want ballots that are going to be mailed in to go into mailboxes, not drop boxes. We want to make sure that there are the security systems that are put in place around mail that are going to be, I think, very important versus the drop boxes. One of the things that we fought for last cycle was where there are drop boxes, we wanted to make sure we had observers on them. We wanted to make sure that we had cameras on them. We wanted to make sure that they were indoors in public buildings, so that you just, again, you worry about the systematic ballot harvesting and cheating. You want to make sure that that's not an option for anybody to consider.
Final question on that particular area, and that is, how do you, this is a never-ending battle, so how do you set up so that you are perpetually doing what you just described, making sure you're always monitoring things, whether that's in 2028, 2026, last year, how do you make sure that a structure is in place and constantly updated?
Yeah, what we did at the RNC was we built a brand new office for election integrity. So we have a political office, we have a communications shop, we have a digital shop and a data shop. Now having a full-time election integrity program is something that we've never done before the 24 election cycle. We're going to continue that up. We are right now building out election integrity programs in Virginia and New Jersey for the governor's races. We are talking right now about what is the map going to be in 2026, where we're going to have those programs in place. I think that this is a permanent feature now of what the RNC and state parties are going to be doing going forward.
Now, one of the primary purposes of either one of the political parties is fundraising, making sure there's enough money to do the things that you just described. I am told the DNC is struggling right now. They are literally struggling to pay the electric bill, let alone fund any programs. What's the status of the RNC? In an off-election year, how are you doing money-wise?
We're doing very well. I think that when we see the reports that come out for the first half of the year, we're going to see record. What we saw in the first quarter of this year was a record first quarter. It means a lot to us that we have Vice President Vance has signed on as the finance chair of the RNC, and he is helping us tremendously in terms of raising the money that we need around the country. And we're also making sure that we're very good stewards of that money. Every dollar that we raise is going to be spent on getting out the vote and protecting the ballot, making sure that we're going to be winning, in those election cycles. So we have a very healthy, robust in terms of where we are financially. The other message that I'll say on the Democrats is that they do not necessarily move all their money through the DNC. They have an ecosystem out there that is a dark money ecosystem. They always have a ton of money. When we look back at the 24 election cycle, the Democrats outspent Republicans by $1 billion in that cycle. But you have to have enough money to get your message out. You don't have to have more money. and we had a better candidate run a better campaign, which is going to be absolutely critical in 26 and beyond.
I don't mean to throw you off here, but and I know this isn't your call by any means. They tell you what the rules are and you play by them. But if you were king, if you could create the rule system, would the contributions be limited in any way? Because right now you can have a billionaire in either party, in the Democrats or in the Republicans, that just says, I'm going to give $100 million, I'm going to give $200 million, and I mean, that's great for that party, but is that fair for the overall system?
Look, I think that you need to be able to have unlimited contributions, but you also have to have accountability. You have to have transparency, right? I think that any contribution that goes into an election campaign should be recorded, and people should know where that dollar came from. Right now, what we have with the federal election laws is a hodgepodge. There are different groups that can take unlimited money. There are different groups that can take money without having to disclose their donors. I have caps. Right? Candidates have caps. We have to disclose every dollar that we take. I cannot take corporate dollars. You know, we're going to work within the system that we have. I think ultimately the key is that people should be able to put the dollars where they want to support the candidates and the parties that they want to, but we should have transparency.
Specific to the RNC, I'm going to ask you a question I used to do in the budgeting process in government, and that is, you can get a job description. Okay, our job is to raise money, our job is to have voter integrity, but I'm always curious, day to day, if the average RNC employee shows up in Washington to work on a Wednesday morning, gets their cup of coffee at 8:05 a.m., then what do?
Yeah, we have a very clear mission to win elections, right? And in order to win elections, you need three things. You have to have a great candidate run a great race. You have to get out the vote, and you have to protect the ballot. So every single person at the RNC, whether they're in our finance team raising money to get this done, our communications team, our political team, our data team, our digital team, they know the mission, right? And we really are going to be focused every single day on making sure that we have the resources and the talent to win those races for our candidates.
You mentioned upcoming governor races, but right now the Republicans control the White House, the Senate, the House of Representatives. Recent American history is filled with one party controlling everything, and in that first off-year election, they get beaten silly, particularly on the House side. But there are often big losses at that time. What happens between right now, summer 2025, and fall of 2026 to try to make sure that doesn't happen with this president, this House, this Senate?
Yeah, really, there's two things that we're focused on, right? So the first is the mechanics. And from a mechanical standpoint, to be able to get out the vote, protect the ballot, that's what we're building right now. We're working with our state parties all across the country. We know there are going to be certain states that are going to be very critical for us, right? So Georgia, we're going to have a governor's race, a Senate race, and several congressionals. Michigan, you know, the same scenario, right? Pennsylvania will have a big governor's race. North Carolina will have a big Senate race. So we're going to know some of those states now. Others are going to evolve as we get closer to Election Day, but we're building out the mechanics to be able to do that. The other is on messaging. The fact is that if we go into this election cycle and President Trump and Congress have delivered for the American people, then we are going to be in a much better position to be able to win these elections. And the president's agenda that he ran on, that the Congress and the Senate majorities were built on, is making sure that we have a strong economy, we have a strong southern border, and making sure that we have a strong standing in the world. The president's delivering right now on that. And when we have a strong economy, when we have a strong southern border, when we're strong around the world, we're leaders in the free world, that's a message that we can take to the voters. So that environment is going to be very important.
Let's bring the conversation full circle, because we started out talking about 10 years ago, President Trump comes down the escalator and talks about those three things. He talked about an economy, which clearly is always the number one issue to the American public. He talked about a border, which surprised many people, but it resonated with the American public. At that time, nobody had thought in terms of that being a top issue, and yet it was. I remember seeing editorials in several newspapers saying, oh, this is so offensive that he would even bring that up, and yet the American public latched onto the border issue, and then a strong defense, a strong presence around the world. And here we are 10 years later, those are the top three issues still. 10 years, he has been consistent on his message. For 10 years, those have been the top three issues in the American public's mind. So let's go through those three one at a time and tell me what has been accomplished on each of those. When we talk about the economy, what is President Trump doing that's different than the previous president?
Well, first and foremost, I think that he made a number of claims in terms of we're going to bring down grocery prices and gasoline prices. We're going to bring down inflation. We've already seen data points that show that all three of those are happening. The biggest things that the administration need to be working on are making sure that we have the tax code right for every community and every family. That's the big, beautiful bill. Right? It is extending the Trump tax cuts. It's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. It is, tax relief for seniors on Social Security. The tax situation needs to be fixed, and we're going to require Congress to get that done.
And what you described there with taxes, the complaint always is Republicans are just trying to help out the rich guy. The ones you've just described, no taxes on tips, that's not the rich guy.
No, the Trump tax cuts, study after study after study has shown the biggest beneficiaries by far were the lower class and middle class. And so that's why we need to make sure that we extend those for every family, for every community. The second big leg on the economic stool is regulatory relief, right? So we want to make sure that we get the government out of the way so that companies can expand, so that they can grow, so that they can, really truly be creators in the new economy. And we need to see that regulatory relief coming out of the various different departments and agencies. That's one that doesn't get a lot of time. It doesn't get a lot of press. It's not sexy, right? And it does take time to kind of manifest itself. But the president has been very attuned to making sure that we have regulatory relief going forward. And the third is making sure that we have trade and a tariff portfolio that are going to benefit American workers and American factories. The president has completely reset the table with the entire world. It's not just one trade deal here, one trade deal over here. What it is right now, every single country, we have over 100 countries at the table today. We already have a new framework in place with India. We have new deals with China. We have a new deal with the UK. These are conversations that if you try to take them one-on-one, never are going to get very far, but the president brought it in, had a universal conversation, and right now those conversations are taking place with over 100 different countries. Once we get all three of these legs together, then I do believe we're going to be in a strong position. We've already seen the Federal Reserve of Atlanta saying that we're going to have very significant GDP growth going forward. That's exactly what the president's trying to generate.
Second of the three issues was the border. What have we seen there?
Well, what we've seen is that last month there were literally zero immigrants that were captured at the border and allowed into the country. We have seen a 99% drop in encounters at the border. The president has effectively shut off the southern border. Now what we need to do is make that permanent. We also need to make sure that we get violent criminal illegal aliens that came into the country under Joe Biden's watch out of the country. And so, the big, beautiful bill has provisions in there to significantly ramp up ICE and also to finish the wall. We want to make sure that this is a permanent fix, not a temporary fix.
Let me throw you a little bit of a curve on the third one, and that is when we talk about the strength of American presence around the globe. I think during Trump's first term, you had several European leaders who kind of snickered, kind of laughed behind his back, or would make comments that were backhanded compliments. They weren't really sincere. I see a whole different manner in which they deal. When he showed up at NATO, this most recent time, I see a whole different approach. Has he been successful in reestablishing the strength and position of the United States on the global face?
He has, and I think that you can take a look at the trip that he recently had to the Middle East as a prime example of that. The fact that he was basically greeted as a hero. The fact that we have much stronger relationships with UAE and Qatar and Saudi Arabia than we did, and that he was able to actually bring back $2 trillion worth of economic investments into the United States from those companies or from those countries is really an indicator, right? The fact that we had significant pushback when the president said that every country should meet their obligations to provide 2% of their GDP for national security, and we just saw him in this last week make an agreement with NATO that they're going to achieve 5%. Investments in terms of their national security. This is not just good for the U.S., it's good for NATO, it's good for all of Europe, right? What we want to see is American leadership around the world, and we're seeing that right now because the president has put the U.S. back in terms of being a leader in the free world.
I always say hope is the greatest human commodity. If people have hope, no matter what their situation, there's a brighter future. How optimistic are you about the future?
I'm very optimistic. You know, I think that one of the things that we've seen is that if you do a few things very well, you can make a marker. You cannot be all things to all people. And the president's agenda is not trying to be all things to all people. He's very, very focused on what America needs to be very strong. You know, when we have an economy that works for every family, for every worker, for every community, that is going to provide hope. That is going to make sure that people are able to afford groceries and medicine and gasoline to be able to drive where they need to drive. You know, that should not be a stretch. That should not be something that we have people in America struggling with, but we saw that people are struggling with it, right? You know, I have tremendous hope that we're going to have peace in the Middle East because the president has made sure that we are not going to have a nuclear capable Iran and that we are going to stand by Israel. We have seen that he is going to be a leader in making sure that NATO is in a position to protect Europe. These are very strong, important markers that we're going to have out there. And when America is clear, when America is strong, the world's a much safer place.
Mr. Chairman, always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely.